Hi guys. Tonight we travel far from the safety of your modern bed. The air around you hums with tension and frost. You stand among thousands of tired men outside the stone walls of a foreign land. The wind gnaws at your fingers. Your breath forms ghosts in the dark, and the ground beneath your boots feels harder than iron. It is the 12th century, and you are part of a Crusader army that has marched across continents, chasing faith and glory. But right now, none of that matters. You are just cold, you are tired, and you are wondering how in the world you are going to survive the night. You probably will not survive this, if we are being honest. A medieval winter in campaign tents is no joke. Frostbite, disease, and exhaustion stalk the camp like invisible predators. The firewood is damp. The wind does not care about your holy cause. Still, men will somehow close their eyes and sleep. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are at it, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. You trudge through the half-frozen mud, past the smell of horses and smoke. The air tastes like wet leather and ash. 1,000 small fires dot the field like stars fallen to earth. The tents around you sag with frost, patched with whatever cloth could be scavenged. A few men huddle by a pit fire, their faces hollow with hunger, their laughter forced. Beyond them, someone sharpens a blade that glints orange in the firelight. You pull your cloak tighter and feel the weight of chainmail biting into your shoulders. The campaign has gone on for weeks. The route through Asia Minor has been cruel, and the supply lines stretch thinner every day. The leaders might speak of divine purpose, but in the camp, faith often takes the form of a warm blanket and dry boots. You make your way to where your company's tents are pitched, finding your corner of canvas and rope. It flaps and creaks like an old sail. Inside, the air is close and sour with sweat and wool. A narrow bed of straw lies waiting. If you are lucky, someone traded for an animal hide to spread over it. You brush away a spider and sink to your knees, removing your boots with stiff fingers. The noise outside never really stops. Men cough, horses snort, armor clanks. A drunk voice somewhere is trying to sing. And always, the wind. The sound of it passing over the camp feels like a ghost sighing in disappointment. You know from the veterans that it is better to sleep with others. Alone, you freeze. Together, bodies share warmth. So, you edge closer to the next man's mat, pretending it is only to make more space. His breath smells like sour ale, but at least it is warm. Someone throws another log on the central fire, and a brief glow lights the interior, revealing the patched walls of the tent and a cluster of weapons stacked near the entrance. You feel oddly safe in the company of those dull steel points. There are small details here that history books rarely mention. Crusaders did not sleep in shining armor every night like in paintings. Most stripped down to linen or wool under tunics, hanging their mail to dry if they could. Some even slept naked beneath their cloaks, believing the heat of the skin stayed better that way. Historians still argue whether this practice came from genuine comfort or just a half-understood idea of hygiene. Whatever the reason, it sometimes meant the difference between waking stiff and waking dead. You settle down at last, pressing your cheek to a folded bundle of cloth that pretends to be a pillow. The earth below you is unforgiving. Even through straw, you can feel the frozen ridges of soil pressing into your ribs. You shift, curl, and try to ignore it. Outside, the faint crackle of the fire fights with the moan of the wind. A horse stamps somewhere close, shaking the frost from its mane. Your thoughts drift to home, to softer beds and warmer nights. You picture the wooden beams of your village hall, the smell of fresh bread, the laughter of familiar faces. But the image fades quickly, swallowed by the reality of the crusading camp. Here, survival is the only comfort. Some claim the first Crusaders hardened themselves through prayer, others through stubbornness. You, though, begin to realize it is not about strength or holiness. It is about small adjustments. wrapping your feet in dry cloth before sleep, keeping a stone near the fire and tucking it under your blanket for warmth, sharing breath with the man beside you without speaking about it. These are the quiet rituals that keep a soldier alive. The tent canvas shifts above you with a sigh, and flakes of frost drift down like ash. You close your eyes, trying to imagine that you are safe. Sleep comes in fits, broken by shivers and the scrape of armor. But eventually, it finds you. It always does. When dawn finally seeps through the cloth walls, the world is silver and still. The fires have burned low, and a crust of ice glistens over every rope and helmet. Your breath hangs heavy in the air, but you are alive. Somehow, against all odds, you made it through one more night. The march will continue soon, and tonight will bring the same battle between warmth and cold, faith and fatigue. But for now, you stretch your sore limbs, blink against the pale light, and remind yourself this is what devotion feels like when stripped of glory: cold, hungry, and painfully human. You wake stiff and aching from the cold, the sound of iron-shod boots crunching over frost already stirring outside. You can smell smoke and animal dung before you even sit up. The fire in the middle of the camp is little more than glowing ash, but the faint warmth is enough to remind you that you survived another night. You stretch, and your joints pop like the hinges of an old gate. Around you, men groan, cough, and mutter prayers as they force their frozen fingers to move. The first thing you notice is the weight on your shoulders, not just the chainmail or the padded gambeson beneath it, but the invisible heaviness of fatigue. Marching day after day across unknown lands, carrying not only weapons but fear, has a way of pressing down on the body until every step feels like a sentence. You drag your armor close and begin the familiar routine of dressing. Each buckle and strap a small act of endurance. The metal is cold enough to sting. You trudge outside the tent, breath clouding around you like fog. The morning sun glints on a sea of helmets and spearheads. Some men kneel in prayer. Others squat near the dying fires, holding their hands out for the last of the heat. The camp smells of sweat, horses, and yesterday's stew. Someone is already shouting orders. You barely hear them through the ringing in your ears. The truth is that exhaustion becomes its own kind of warmth. It dulls the body's complaints, wraps your mind in a fog that makes even the cold seem distant. By the time night comes again, you are too tired to feel much of anything. Historians often write about bravery or faith, but they rarely dwell on this quieter truth. The Crusaders' greatest ally in sleep was utter physical collapse. You do not sleep so much as fall into unconsciousness. A chronicler from the First Crusade once described soldiers sleeping as if dead, yet snoring louder than the trumpets of angels. He might have been exaggerating, but only slightly. Imagine hundreds of men, wrapped in cloaks, sprawled on straw, too drained to care about dignity or dirt. The snores and coughs mingle with the rustle of the wind through tents. It is not peaceful, but it is real. You remember the first weeks of marching when your body still resisted. The ache in your calves, the chafing of armor, the constant thirst. Now, all of that has become background noise. You march because everyone else does. You eat when food appears. You sleep wherever you can drop. There is comfort in the sameness, the rhythm of fatigue that carries you like a current. Some say soldiers hardened to this life by faith. Others argue it was simply habit. Historians still debate whether belief truly kept them going, or if it was the brutal discipline of the army itself. Whatever the cause, by the time darkness falls, the weariness is universal. Even the officers' tents grow quiet early. A peculiar detail survives in a few letters home. Some Crusaders wrote that they preferred sleeping in partial armor. It was not comfortable, but the sense of readiness mattered more than rest. They feared night raids, sudden ambushes, or even betrayal from within. Many wrapped only their torsos in mail, leaving their arms free. The constant weight of it could bruise skin and strain shoulders, but peace of mind was rare enough to justify the discomfort. You tighten your belt and shoulder your sword. The world around you hums with movement. Someone's horse screams in protest as a rider hauls it from its rest. Men curse softly at the cold metal of stirrups. You look at their faces, pale and cracked from the wind. Every one of them has the same look, half asleep but still moving. As the day drags on, you learn that exhaustion is not only physical but spiritual. It gnaws at faith, turning prayers into murmurs and conviction into habit. Yet every so often, something stirs the spirit again. A sermon, a sight of a relic, a rumor of victory. Those moments are like sparks in the ashes, enough to keep the will burning through another night. You march until your legs stop listening. Dust coats your mouth. The air shifts from biting cold to damp chill as the sun dips. The camp rises again out of the dark, fires flickering to life like constellations. You lower your gear beside a familiar patch of ground, and without a word, start to undress. The same cloak, the same boots, the same scratchy straw bed. It is almost comforting in its misery. Before lying down, you rub your shoulders where the mail has left red marks. You think briefly about removing it altogether, but the thought of losing time in the morning, or worse, being caught unprepared, keeps you from doing it. So, you simply loosen a few straps and lie back. You stare at the faint glow of the campfire through the tent flap. Outside, the night deepens, and the temperature drops again. Your body is too heavy for thoughts. Muscles hum with fatigue. Your heart beats slow and steady. There is a strange peace in that moment between awareness and oblivion. The body knows what to do. It shuts down everything that is not essential. A quirky story circulates among the men about a knight who could fall asleep standing, still holding his lance. You laugh at the idea, but secretly you understand it. The line between waking and sleeping is so thin now that you could almost drift away mid-step. You adjust your cloak, pull it over your chin, and let your breathing slow. Around you, snores begin again, rough and human. A few muttered prayers fade into silence. The fire's glow flickers against the tent walls, painting shadows that move like ghosts. You close your eyes, and for a moment, it feels like the earth itself rocks you to sleep. Tomorrow will be the same. March, hunger, cold, and another desperate search for warmth. But tonight, exhaustion wins over discomfort. The chill still bites at your toes, but your mind drifts far away, beyond the camp, beyond the war, into a kind of sleep only the utterly spent can know. The camp spreads before you in uneven rows, a patchwork of canvas and wool. The morning chill lingers, threading through every seam, biting at fingers as you help raise the tent walls again after last night's windstorm. The ground is slick and grey. Somewhere, a man curses in French, another mutters a psalm in Latin, and above it all the gulls cry, circling over the smell of salted meat and horses. You duck beneath the flap of your own shelter and take in the space that will be your small piece of the world for tonight. It is humble, but vital. The tent is made of heavy linen coated with oil to resist damp, stretched between wooden poles that groan under tension. When the wind hits, it hums like a low drum. Beneath it, you can almost feel safe. A reliable chronicle from the Second Crusade describes how tents like these were carried on wagons, each one a symbol of rank. Nobles slept under painted cloth, marked with crosses or personal crests. Common soldiers made do with plain ones, often patched from sails or cloaks. The wealthier knights sometimes lined the interior with wool or fur, but most men slept with nothing between them and the fabric except prayer and fatigue. Few people today realize how much of medieval warfare depended on tent making. Some units carried their own canvas craftsmen, soldiers who doubled as tailors by day and engineers by night. Others bartered with locals for hides and flax to patch tiers. In the rare luxury of a permanent siege camp, a tent might evolve into something approaching comfort floor mats, candles, even a rough altar tucked into the corner. Modern researchers remain uncertain how well these tents truly kept out the elements. The surviving fragments suggest poor insulation by modern standards, yet written accounts mention men waking warm from shared body heat. Perhaps the canvas, dense with wax and grime, sealed better than it appears, or perhaps memory simply softened the discomfort. Either way, you learn that warmth is not only a matter of fabric, but of faith in what little you have. You lie back and run your hand along the rough weave above. Each thread holds stories of spinning wheels and women's hands far away. Every crusader carried pieces of home woven into their shelter. A knight from Normandy might sleep under flax from Flanders, a Lombard beneath wool spun in Jerusalem markets. These silent exchanges of trade followed armies wherever they marched, carrying the fingerprints of unseen workers across continents. As daylight fades, you crouch near the tent's entrance and watch the camp shift into its nightly rhythm. Some men hang charms on the ropes, small wooden crosses or bits of bone carved into symbols. Others patch holes with whatever they can find, bits of saddlecloth, scraps of a fallen comrade's tunic. The smell of pitch seeps into the air as seams are resealed by firelight. It is tedious work, but it keeps the wind out. Inside, the air grows heavy with the scent of oil and sweat. You notice how sound changes within these thin walls. Outside, it is the roar of men and horses. Inside, it becomes a heartbeat. Conversations muffle to whispers. The flicker of a candle throws enormous shadows. The tent becomes more than shelter. It becomes a cocoon, separating exhaustion from chaos. A peculiar detail mentioned in one forgotten diary claims that some soldiers sang quietly as they sealed their tents, believing certain hymns would strengthen the fabric. It sounds foolish to modern ears, yet when you think of the storms they faced, a whispered chant feels almost reasonable. You find yourself humming along with someone nearby, a melody rising and fading with the wind. You settle into your place, rearranging your cloak and weapons. The fire outside casts a dull orange glow through the seams. The flickering light makes the canvas seem alive, breathing with every gust. You imagine for a moment that the tent itself protects you, a living skin against the world's cruelty. When rain begins, you listen to it drum above, steady and hypnotic. The drops merge into a rhythm that blurs thought into half dreams. Water seeps at the edges, but you are too tired to care. A few unlucky soldiers curse as leaks find them, while you shift slightly and stay dry for now. A faint voice outside recites a prayer to St. George, asking for safe rest. Another replies in Greek, their accents tangled by exhaustion. The camp slowly quiets. In the distance, a bell marks the change of watch. The night feels endless, yet strangely peaceful. You think about the way people centuries later will picture these tents grand, orderly, noble. The truth is humbler. They smell of wet wool, smoke, and human closeness. They collapse in storms and must be rebuilt by cold, numb hands. They are not symbols of glory, but of endurance. Some modern archaeologists studying Crusader camps have uncovered tiny iron hooks and scorched rings of stones, remnants of where these tents once stood. It is strange to think of all those knights reduced to artifacts no bigger than a coin. Still, through those traces, you can almost hear the whisper of canvas and the sigh of sleeping men. You shift again, pulling your cloak higher, eyes half closed. The tent flaps with the rhythm of your breathing, as if the whole world inhales and exhales with you. Outside, the wind keens across the plain. Inside, there is only warmth, shadow, and the slow surrender to sleep. The ground beneath you hardens as the temperature drops again. You kneel, pushing your palm into the soil, feeling the chill creep upward through your wrist. The tent is flimsy protection against such cold, and the earth itself feels like a living thing, ancient and indifferent. Tonight you learn what every crusader must eventually accept. The world beneath is both your bed and your enemy. When you pull away the top layer of straw, a puff of cold mist rises. The straw crackles faintly, brittle from use. Someone traded good money for this bundle yesterday, cut from a nearby field that had already been scavenged by both soldiers and locals. There is never enough to go around. You shake it out, spread it evenly, and realize this yellow tangle of stalks may decide whether you wake stiff or not at all. Contemporary records suggest that soldiers on campaign often slept directly on straw mats or sacks filled with grass. In richer camps, reeds from riverbanks were mixed in to help keep moisture away. It was crude insulation, but surprisingly effective when layered properly. Those who had none used spare clothing, cloaks, or even horse blankets stolen from the stables. A curious detail mentioned in an old travel diary claims that some men slept over freshly cut branches, believing that the living wood would draw away illness. It might sound foolish to modern ears, yet when the cold eats through your skin, you are willing to believe anything that promises warmth. Modern researchers remain divided on how effective these makeshift beds really were. Some suggest that layering straw and fabric trapped enough body heat to make sleep possible, while others point to the endless reports of frostbite and illness. Perhaps both are true. The method worked just enough to keep a man alive, but not enough to make him comfortable. You watch as others prepare their beds. The scene feels strangely intimate. Men who would swing swords at dawn now squat in silence, arranging straw, rolling cloaks, spreading furs. A knight removes his boots, rubs his swollen feet, then buries them in the straw like a child hiding treasure. Beside him, a squire carefully shakes out a sheepskin, muttering about lice. The scent of animal oil and earth mingles into something oddly soothing. You lie down at last. The straw rustles softly beneath you, releasing a faint smell of summer. For a moment, it feels almost pleasant. You shift until your hips find the hollow that fits them best. Beneath the straw, the ground stays cold, but it is a distant cold now, muffled by the fragile layer between skin and soil. There is an art to sleeping on the earth. You must learn how to keep your heart warm while letting your face cool. You must position your arms so that blood does not stagnate. You must keep one ear tuned for danger, yet not so alert that you never rest. The veterans teach the new recruits to curl toward the east if possible, to catch the first warmth of sunrise. Little tricks of survival passed from one tired mouth to another. Few people today realize that Crusaders often shared their bedding with animals. A mule or dog lying nearby could mean a difference of several degrees of warmth. The animal's breath created a pocket of air just warm enough to make sleep bearable. There are even accounts of soldiers arranging straw around their horses' legs and sleeping right beside them, the rhythmic snorting of the beasts acting like a lullaby. You can hear that sound now, faint and steady, through the tent wall. Somewhere a horse shifts its weight, and the straw beneath you stirs in sympathy. You close your eyes, feeling the closeness of life in all its forms. The men beside you, the animals outside, the insects in the bedding, the invisible breath of the earth itself. The truth is that comfort was relative. After weeks of marching, a pile of straw felt luxurious. You have stopped dreaming of feather beds and hearth fires. Now your fantasies involve dry socks and an extra layer of wool. The mind adapts faster than pride admits. An old soldier once told you, "If you can make peace with the ground, you can survive anything." You did not believe him then, but now you understand. The earth that chills you also holds you steady. It is the same soil that has seen kings crowned and beggars buried. It accepts your weight without question. As the night deepens, the fire outside fades to a faint orange pulse. The straw shifts under your breathing, crackling softly like faraway rain. You listen to the whispers of other men settling in, a cough here, a prayer there. Someone laughs quietly, the sound dry as parchment. Then silence again. A half-forgotten superstition drifts through your mind that if you sleep close enough to the earth, you can feel its heartbeat. You press your palm flat against the straw and wait. Nothing at first, then maybe a faint tremor, or perhaps it is only your pulse echoing through the cold. You cannot tell, but the thought is strangely comforting. You pull your cloak higher and let the night take you. The ground beneath feels less like stone now, more like a slow breath rising and falling beneath your body. It is not soft, but it is honest. You close your eyes, and for a few quiet hours you belong to the same ancient rhythm that has lulled travelers to sleep since time began. The sun slips behind a bank of clouds as evening deepens, and the camp takes on its nightly rhythm again. You wander toward the glow of the fires, your breath clouding in front of you. The air smells of wet ash and horse sweat. Everywhere, men are gathering sticks, blowing into smouldering piles, and coaxing flame from reluctant sparks. It is here, around these fragile circles of light, that the Crusaders learned one of their oldest forms of alchemy, turning cold and fear into warmth and fellowship. The fires are the heartbeat of the camp. Each one belongs to a small knot of soldiers, maybe 5 or 6 men, all crouched close. The flames paint their faces in shades of orange and shadow. They talk in murmurs, their words carried away by the wind before they reach another group. You join them, holding your hands out to the flickering warmth that feels precious as gold. Chroniclers from the period record that Crusader armies often spent as much energy tending their fires as fighting their enemies. Wood was scarce on many campaigns. Armies marching across Anatolia or the plains of Syria found themselves stripping orchards and tearing down wooden fences just to have fuel for the night. Some even burned the wagons that carried their food when the cold became unbearable. One overlooked detail in a soldier's letter describes how the men would bury glowing embers under ash before sleep, to preserve them for morning. It was a small miracle each dawn when a few breaths could summon fire again from the grey dust. That little ember meant coffee-like warmth in an age before such comforts existed. Experts remain uncertain how they managed fire control without burning down entire camps. Evidence from excavation sites shows only faint traces of hearths, suggesting that most fires were shallow pits lined with stones. Others believe soldiers learned to dig narrow channels so the smoke would drift sideways instead of upward, avoiding detection by nearby enemies. The truth may lie somewhere between engineering and luck. You squat beside the flames, watching the wood twist and pop. The smoke stings your eyes, yet you find yourself mesmerized. A knight across from you pokes the embers with his sword tip, pretending it is a dragon's tongue. His squire chuckles quietly, teeth flashing in the firelight. For a moment, everyone forgets the cold. The camp is alive with these tiny rituals. One man toasts a strip of dried meat, holding it just above the coals until the fat sizzles. Another warms a stone to place under his cloak later. The simplest things take on sacred importance here. You can almost taste the relief that spreads through the group as the warmth soaks into numb fingers. Few people today realize how dangerous campfires could be in enemy territory. A single spark at the wrong time could betray a whole company's position. Scouts often patrolled the perimeter, ready to smother flames if needed. Yet, men still risked it. Warmth was worth exposure. After all, what use is secrecy if the cold robs you of sleep and sanity? A peculiar story circulates through the camp, half legend and half warning. It tells of a company of soldiers who built too many fires one winter night and were spotted by Saracen riders. The attack came at dawn, catching them unarmed and drowsy. Since then, veterans teach new recruits to keep fires low and feed them only when the stars are bright enough to hide the smoke. Whether the story is truth or exaggeration, you do not care. It feels real enough in this cold. You study the men around you. Their faces look softer now, lines of worry blurred by light and fatigue. Someone hums a tune under his breath, an old folk melody that sounds out of place here but comforting nonetheless. The fire crackles in rhythm with it. Even the horses nearby have settled, their silhouettes like moving statues against the sky. The fire draws memories as well as warmth. Talk drifts toward home, vineyards in France, farms in Flanders, the scent of bread in Italian kitchens. Every spark seems to call up another image from the world they left behind. You listen quietly, the nostalgia washing over you. The warmth on your skin makes those memories almost tangible, like touching sunlight through smoke. After a while, you notice something curious. The air farther from the fire feels sharper, cleaner, filled with stars. When you step back, the world expands again, black and vast. the silence punctuated only by distant hoofbeats and a wolf's faint cry. You shiver, then step forward once more into the orange circle, where life feels possible. Modern historians often note that the fire was more than heat. It was the camp's communication system. Orders were shouted across its light, and night watches relied on it to signal changes in guard. Its crackling noise masked private conversations and secret confessions alike. In every sense, the fire was both shield and stage. You wrap your cloak tighter and study the glowing coals. Sleep will come soon, and the embers will dim. You think of how fragile this comfort really is, how easily one gust or rain shower could erase it. You reach out a stick and nudge a coal into the center again, watching the flame bloom bright. It feels almost like hope. When you finally rise, your legs are stiff, but your body hums with warmth. You walk back toward your tent, the faint heat clinging to your clothes. Behind you, someone hums again, the tune carrying softly on the night air. The fire continues to crackle, small and defiant against the endless dark. You smile, knowing that in a world of steel and prayer, sometimes survival begins with something as simple as a well-tended flame. You wake to find frost edging your cloak and the air biting at your cheeks. The fire has burned down to pale ash, leaving no warmth behind. As you rise and stamp your feet, you think about the delicate art of keeping the body alive in such cold. It is not bravery or faith that saves you. It is the layers. Every garment, every scrap of fabric, becomes a weapon against the night. You kneel beside your pack and begin the slow process of dressing again. Linen first, always linen, because it breathes and keeps sweat from freezing against the skin. Then wool, thick and coarse, heavy with the smell of smoke and salt. Over that, a padded gambeson, quilted from countless scraps. Finally, the chainmail, cold as morning iron. You shudder as the weight settles on your shoulders. It feels like wearing an entire season of winter. A contemporary description from a Templar rulebook notes that the knights were instructed to wear tunics and cloaks of wool in winter, linen in summer. The detail seems small, but it reveals how even faith-based orders understood the science of comfort. Wool holds heat even when wet, and linen wicks away moisture. The combination became the medieval version of modern thermal layering. Few people today realize how inventive soldiers were with their clothing. Some stitched bits of fur inside sleeves, others lined boots with straw. There are mentions of improvised leggings made from horsehair rope or felt cut from saddle padding. One chronicler even joked that a certain company of Crusaders looked more like a herd of mangy beasts than men of God after weeks of such adaptation. You smile at the image. Survival was rarely elegant. Scholars still disagree about whether armor was worn at night for warmth or for safety. Some argue that the metal offered insulation against wind, while others claim it only trapped sweat and made the cold worse once removed. The truth likely depended on the climate, the season, and the soldier's luck. You imagine yourself in both states, half freezing either way. You step outside and stretch, your breath hanging in the still air. Around you, men are tightening belts, adjusting straps, checking buckles. Their movements are mechanical now, a daily ritual of resilience. The clink of metal mingles with the faint crackle of fresh fires being coaxed to life. Someone sneezes loudly. Another curses as his glove slips into the mud. It is an orchestra of ordinary suffering. As the day unfolds, you notice how much your body relies on rhythm to generate warmth. Marching, lifting, packing, each motion stirs blood through chilled limbs. The officers know this, which is why they keep the men moving even when everyone craves rest. Stagnation kills faster than battle. Later, as the sun sinks again and the camp reforms, you see men wrapping scarves and hoods before the wind returns. Layers are more than comfort now. They are identity. A knight's cloak might be dyed deep red or black, signaling allegiance. But underneath, every layer is the same rough brown of survival. Rank dissolves when frost sets in. A curious superstition circulates among the squires. Never remove all your layers at once. They say the cold spirits slip inside through bare skin. Some half-mocking priest claims the rule is symbolic of sin, but you sense a practical wisdom in it. You follow it yourself, changing one garment at a time, never fully exposed. You run your fingers over the seams of your tunic. Each stitch holds the memory of the hands that made it, maybe a sister, a mother, or a village seamstress who whispered blessings into the fabric. That quiet care feels closer tonight than any relic or sermon. You think about how faith and fabric are not so different. Both hold warmth if you tend them properly. Modern textile experts who study medieval clothing point out that wool from the Levant was softer and better spun than what Europeans brought. Some Crusaders adapted quickly, trading heavy northern cloaks for local robes. There is even evidence that they admired the layered style of desert peoples, learning that loose wrapping could trap heat just as well as tight stitching. Necessity makes quick students. You crouch beside a new fire and test the heat on your hands. The glow seeps into your palms, then deeper into your chest. You feel how the layers keep that heat close, trapping it like a secret. Someone next to you laughs, his breath clouding like smoke. You realize the sound of laughter carries warmth too, filling the cold spaces between words. When night settles again, you stretch out beneath your cloak. The layers press close against your skin, smelling of wool, oil, and faint sweat. Each one feels like a story, a reminder that survival is made of small, practical choices. You close your eyes and breathe in the scent of the fabric, earthy and human. Outside, the camp hums softly with life, each sleeper wrapped in the same fragile defense against the vast dark. The cold no longer frightens you as much. It is an old adversary now, and you have learned its habits. It waits for carelessness, feeds on neglect. But tonight you are careful. Tonight you are wrapped in knowledge as much as cloth, and for a few quiet hours, that is enough. By now, the routine of the cold has become part of your body. Each night feels familiar, yet no less demanding. You settle near your tent's entrance, the fire's last embers painting your cloak in shifting light. You can smell the wool, the faint musk of lanolin, and the damp earth underneath. These are the smells of survival. The fabrics around you tell their own quiet story. Crusaders marched beneath banners of silk, yet slept wrapped in rough wool and linen. The contrast between glory and grit could not be sharper. A fragment of an old Crusader inventory lists wool cloaks, linen shirts, and coarse canvas bedding as essential provisions. No velvet, no silk for common soldiers. Even nobles discovered that a simple wool blanket mattered more than any jewel. Few people realize how advanced medieval textile work could be. Skilled weavers in Europe produced tightly spun wool that resisted wind and water better than most modern coats. Linen came from flax fields tended by entire villages, each plant pulled, combed, and beaten into thread. Every garment worn here carries the labor of dozens of unseen hands. You trace the weave of your cloak and wonder who made it. A forgotten merchant's ledger from the port of Acre mentions shipments of dyed fabrics arriving from Italy and Flanders, traded for spices and salt. Some soldiers bought extra tunics there, cut from linen so fine that the locals mocked their northern coarseness. Those who could not afford such luxuries scavenged scraps from abandoned towns or stitched together bits of torn canvas from broken tents. Researchers continue to puzzle over how Crusaders preserved their clothing through years of marching. Some believe they carried small kits of bone needles and thread twisted from sinew or horsehair. Others argue that local women were paid to patch and repair garments in temporary markets near the camps. The evidence is thin, but the logic feels right. No army could have survived long without constant mending. As you sit by the fading light, you rub the edge of your cloak between thumb and finger. It is surprisingly soft, warmed by the oil from your skin. The wool hums faintly when you move, a dry, whispering sound that reminds you of home. You remember your mother hanging freshly washed linens by the hearth, steam rising as they dried. The memory slips away, replaced by the smell of smoke and sweat. A peculiar account from a minor knight describes a strange practice. Men sometimes slept with damp cloths wrapped around their feet, believing it would draw the chill out of the body by morning. It likely did the opposite, but such experiments show how desperate they were to outwit the cold. In the absence of science, hope itself became a kind of medicine. You glance at the others around the fire. Some have draped their cloaks directly over the flames to warm them before sleep. A risky move, but it works if you are careful. The smell of singed wool hangs in the air. A few men share scraps of fabric to patch tears, their coarse fingers fumbling in the dim light. These are small acts of brotherhood born from necessity. Archaeologists studying sites from the later Crusades have uncovered fragments of dyed wool, still faintly tinted red or blue after centuries underground. The colors were symbolic, often marking allegiance or faith. A red cross sewn onto white cloth, a reminder that beneath layers of grime and blood, these men carried ideals as well as exhaustion. You lie back, your head resting on your folded cloak. The fabric crackles faintly as it settles. Around you, the sounds of the camp fade into the soft breathing of men too tired to dream. You tug your cloak tighter, tucking its rough edge under your chin. It is heavy, coarse, and a little damp at the hem, but it feels like a promise. The layers that keep you warm are the same ones that link you to the others. Each man wears the same fibers, endures the same itch, breathes the same smell of damp wool and burning pitch. In this shared discomfort, there is equality. Rank and wealth dissolve when the temperature drops low enough. A few tents away, someone hums a tune in a language you barely know. The melody threads through the camp like smoke, caught by the wind, rising and falling with the flames. The sound is simple, soothing, almost like the rhythm of weaving itself. You imagine the shuttle passing through the loom back and forth, creating the fabric that now guards your life. The night grows colder. You can feel the frost forming on the tent ropes outside, tiny crystals sparkling where the moon catches them. You pull the cloak over your head, shutting out the light. Inside the wool's darkness, there is warmth. It smells of effort and endurance. It feels like being held by the work of countless hands, stretched across centuries, whispering that you are not alone in your struggle against the cold. You lie close to another soldier tonight, the two of you breathing the same cloud of frozen air. There is no embarrassment in it now, only instinct. The body knows before the mind does that warmth shared is warmth saved. Around you, the tent hums softly with human sounds, sniffles, coughs, the sigh of shifting weight on straw. It is a strange lullaby, rough yet comforting. A reliable description from a chronicler of the Third Crusade says that foot soldiers often slept 2 or 3 to a bed of straw, as if they were brothers born of the same womb. The phrasing sounds poetic, but you suspect it was simply practical. 3 bodies pressed together meant 3 sources of heat. It was survival mathematics, not affection. Few modern readers realize how intimate medieval life could be. Privacy was a luxury, and sleeping shoulder to shoulder was common even in monasteries and city inns. Crusader camps, with their canvas walls and bitter nights, blurred the lines between friendship, duty, and necessity. You can feel the shared pulse of exhaustion in the air, an unspoken bond that smells of sweat, smoke, and fear. An amusing but plausible note in a 12th century letter mentions that some soldiers argued over who would lie in the middle, since the center was warmest. The unlucky men at the edges often woke half frozen and resentful. You have learned to find that sweet spot yourself, the middle where you can steal warmth without drawing attention. Specialists studying medieval military life still debate whether this close sleeping arrangement bred camaraderie or tension. Some suggest it deepened trust, forging friendships that lasted long after the campaign. Others argue it caused quarrels, theft, and disease. Both may be right. Proximity creates as many problems as it solves. The man beside you shifts, his elbow brushing your ribs. You smell old wine on his breath. He mutters something about his horse and drifts back into sleep. You can hear his heartbeat faintly, slow and steady, grounding you in this fragile world of fabric and frost. Outside, The wind sighs through the camp like a ghost searching for a door. You think of all the layers of companionship this life builds. You share food, labor, and fear. You share silence when words fail. Now, you share the simple warmth of existing together in the same narrow space. The fire outside flickers through the tent seams, making his shadow rise and fall like a tide. You wonder if you will remember his name when this campaign ends, or if he will simply become one of many faces that kept you alive through winter. A fragment from a soldier's song drifts into your thoughts, something half remembered. If I die, my brother, keep my cloak, for it remembers me. The line makes you smile, sad and sincere. Maybe the cloak does remember. Everything here holds traces of its owner, the smell of skin, the shape of breath, the rhythm of sleep. You pull your cloak tighter around both of you. The gesture is automatic. The man does not stir. His warmth spreads through the shared fabric, and for the first time tonight, your hands stop trembling. You focus on the sounds outside instead. The murmur of sentries talking softly, the faint crack of ice breaking under a horse's hoof, the whisper of distant water. Life persists in small noises. A curious discovery by archaeologists in the Levant shows traces of twin impressions in what once was a sleeping pit, pressed side by side into hardened soil, the marks of two bodies preserved in time, curled close, like mirror images. It is humbling to think that even in war, companionship leaves fossils. You close your eyes and feel the rhythm of breath, two bodies making a small island of heat in the endless night. You realize this closeness is not weakness. It is the most human thing you can do, reach toward another heartbeat when the cold threatens to erase yours. Sleep comes slowly, but when it does, it feels deeper than before. The sounds of the camp fade into the rhythm of shared breathing. For a few hours, the walls of the tent, the frost, even the fear of morning dissolve. There is only warmth, fleeting but real, held between two living souls refusing to freeze. You drift between waking and sleep, caught in that soft blur where every sound feels larger than it should. The camp around you breathes, creaks, and murmurs in its uneasy rest. Someone snores like a grinding millstone, and another coughs until the tent cloth trembles. Beyond those familiar human noises lies the real orchestra of the night, the rhythm of the watch. A careful chronicler of the Third Crusade once noted that the night watch was the spine of the camp, a living line of men who kept danger at bay while others slept. Their steps were measured, slow and steady, marking time through darkness like the pendulum of survival. Every 2 or 3 hours, the guards rotated, each pair walking a circle around the camp's edge, their torches low to hide the light. Few people today imagine how deeply those sounds shaped the dreams of the soldiers within. The scrape of boots over gravel, the faint clink of weapons, the quiet challenge whispered to approaching shadows. Each sound meant safety for now, and dread for later. The absence of sound, though, that was what froze your blood. Silence meant something had gone wrong. A curious line in a French knight's diary mentions that some men could not sleep without hearing the regular call of the watch. It became a kind of lullaby, a reminder that someone was awake to keep death at a polite distance. You can relate. The rhythm of footfalls and soft murmured counters feels strangely comforting, like the heartbeat of the camp itself. Specialists in medieval warfare still argue about how disciplined these night watches really were. Some believe they followed strict rotation and precise routes, with torches dimmed and horns ready for alarm. Others think that exhaustion often led to lapses, men leaning on spears and dozing under the stars. The truth, as always, probably wandered somewhere between the two. You shift slightly, your ear pressed to the earth, catching faint vibrations as the guards pace. You can almost trace their path in your mind, each circle of movement weaving around the sleeping army like a protective thread. The sound fades, replaced by the wind whispering across the tents, then returns again. Step, pause, step, pause, a rhythm as old as fear itself. Someone outside mutters a password, answered by another voice. Then the faint sound of laughter. You imagine them stamping their feet against the cold, huddled together, sharing the last warmth of their torches. The firelight throws tall, wandering shadows that stretch across the frozen ground like restless ghosts. In quieter moments, you can hear animals stirring too, horses shifting in their sleep, the faint jingle of tack, a dog padding through straw. These noises mix with the distant hum of the centuries until the whole camp becomes one great breathing creature, half asleep but still alive. A traveller who joined the armies as a pilgrim wrote that he once followed the watch's circle in the dark, counting his steps beside them. He said it felt like walking inside a living clock, each rotation marking the slow passage of danger into dawn. You picture that now, the endless loop of men guarding their comrades from unseen threats. There is poetry in that kind of monotony. Modern scholars studying military psychology note that such repetitive rhythms can soothe the mind, lulling even the anxious into brief rest. Perhaps that is why you find yourself calming with each faint step outside. Fear becomes background noise. Fatigue fills its place. A superstition common among Crusaders warned against speaking loudly during the watch hours, for sound was said to draw wandering spirits. The guards believed that demons walked alongside them, whispering temptations to abandon their posts. Some tied bits of blessed cloth to their belts for protection. Whether through faith or fear, the practice endured through generations. You listen again. Somewhere a horn sounds softly, not an alarm, just a shift in duty. The tone drifts through the camp, low and mournful. For a moment it feels like part of a dream. You turn onto your side, pull the cloak over your ear, and let the rhythm guide you. The wind rises and falls. The footsteps return. A single spark flares outside, then vanishes into darkness. It occurs to you that the camp is like a great organism, with the watchers as its pulse, keeping it alive through the long night. Their movement reminds the rest of you that the world still turns, that dawn is possible. You whisper a silent thanks to whoever walks that circle now, unseen but vital. Sleep finally takes you, steady as the pacing guards. You dream of torches moving like stars around the edge of the world, each flame a promise that warmth still exists somewhere beyond the cold. When you wake, the sun will already be rising, and the watch will have vanished into daylight, their quiet work forgotten until night returns. The camp stirs again with the restless noises of morning. Frost glitters on the ropes, horses stamp and snort, and the pale sky begins to lighten. You stretch under your cloak and realize that the cold never truly left. It simply hid, waiting for the fire to die. As you step outside, the smell of animals greets you: hot breath, wet leather, and the unmistakable musk of manure. Yet in this rough world, the beasts are your most faithful companions. A chronicler from the time of King Richard described the Crusader camps as a kingdom of men and beasts, where horses, mules, and dogs shared every hardship. The animals ate, slept, and often suffered beside their masters. In many ways, they were as vital as weapons or armor. Without them, the army could not march, fight, or even stay warm. Few people today realize how close Crusaders slept to their animals. Tents and stables blurred together, divided only by ropes or rough fences. When the wind screamed through the camp, some soldiers pulled their cloaks and bedrolls near the horses to steal their warmth. A single horse could radiate heat like a small fire, its breath fogging the air in gentle waves. You move closer to one now, resting your hand on its flank. The warmth under its hide is alive, rhythmic, reassuring. An unusual note in a knight's personal journal mentions that many soldiers preferred to sleep with their dogs. Warhounds were valued not only as guards but as living blankets. Their thick coats trapped heat, and their instincts kept danger at bay. One soldier wrote affectionately of a mastiff that curled around his feet every night for 2 winters straight, a friendship that outlasted most men. Modern historians still discuss whether Crusaders truly treated their animals with care or simple necessity. Some accounts speak of affection and loyalty, others describe beatings and neglect. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. A man could love his horse and still drive it too far. Compassion in these conditions was always mixed with desperation. You feed your mount a handful of barley, watching it chew with slow patience. Its eyes glisten like dark amber in the dim light. Nearby, another soldier scratches his mule's ears, whispering softly in his native tongue. The camp feels gentler in these small moments, the violence of the day not yet awake. A curious tradition from the later Crusades tells that men sometimes tied bells or small charms around their animals' necks to keep away evil spirits. Whether it was superstition or a way to track them in the fog, the sound must have been comforting. You imagine the soft jingle of brass blending with the snorts and sighs of the night. When the air grows colder after sunset, the beasts gather together instinctively, huddling near the leeward sides of tents. The soldiers join them, grateful for the heat that rises from their bodies. You remember one freezing night when a man shared his blanket with a dying mule just to keep his own hands from stiffening. In war, pity and practicality often share the same face. Archaeological digs near ancient Crusader camps have uncovered traces of compacted soil marked by hoofprints and burned hay, evidence that fires were sometimes lit inside animal enclosures for extra warmth. The idea sounds reckless now, but for soldiers facing the endless chill of foreign plains, even danger was preferable to freezing. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. The scent of hay and horsehair fills your lungs. It is not pleasant, but it feels alive. The warmth of the beast beneath your hand travels into your bones. You understand now that survival was always a shared act, a partnership between humans and animals forged in necessity. The man beside you laughs softly, telling a story about his horse stealing a loaf of bread from the cook's tent. His laughter rolls through the morning air, light and brief. You laugh with him, and for that small instant, the camp feels like a village waking for work rather than an army preparing for hardship. As night approaches again, you lead your horse closer to your tent. Its body blocks the wind that cuts through the canvas. The rhythmic sound of breathing yours, the horses, the faint murmur of others nearby blends into one long sigh. You pull your cloak around you and lean against the animal's warm flank, feeling the pulse beneath its skin. The stars above shimmer coldly, but their light feels distant, unimportant. The world of warmth is here, in the heartbeat against your shoulder. You close your eyes, lulled by that steady rhythm, and for a little while the cold forgets your name. When the last fire fades and the night presses in, you find yourself caught between fear and ritual. Around you the camp has gone still, except for the faint murmur of prayer. For the Crusaders, sleep was never just rest. It was a small surrender to faith. You kneel near the dying glow of a candle, your hands clasped, your breath turning the flame into a trembling halo. A monk who marched with the early Crusades wrote that soldiers prayed each evening as though they might not wake. Their words asked forgiveness for sins they had not yet committed, mercy for battles not yet fought. To sleep was to release control, to trust that God, or perhaps simple chance, would allow another sunrise. Few modern readers understand how deeply religion structured these moments. Crusaders did not separate faith from survival. Every action, from eating to undressing, was framed as devotion. The camp became a moving monastery where swords replaced psalters, and even exhaustion became an offering. You whisper the same prayers now, half out of belief and half from habit, letting their rhythms steady your pulse. An obscure pilgrim's note tells of soldiers carrying small wooden crosses into their tents, pressing them beneath their pillows before sleep. The belief was that the symbol would guard against evil dreams and wandering spirits. Sometimes the crosses broke under their heads, leaving splinters that felt like punishment, yet they still used them. Faith, even when painful, was preferable to fear. Historians remain divided on how sincerely the Crusaders held to nightly devotion. Some see it as true piety, others as superstition reinforced by the terror of darkness. Either way, the result was the same. Prayer offered a rhythm for the restless, a bridge between exhaustion and surrender. You shift on your knees, the ground cold and unyielding. The candle flickers again, and the flame paints soft light on your hands. You think of the priests who bless these soldiers at dawn, of relics carried through battle, of the murmured Latin that floats through the night like incense. You do not understand all the words, but the sound alone feels protective. Around the camp, quiet voices rise and fall. Some recite entire psalms, others only mutter a single word, Deus, perhaps, or a saint's name. In that chorus of faith, you sense a shared rhythm, like many hearts beating together against the cold. You close your eyes and let it wash through you. A curious detail survives in an Arabic observer's account of Crusader life. He noted, almost with amusement, that the Franks prayed more at night than by day. To him, their fear of darkness bordered on madness, a sign of weakness. Yet even he admitted that their devotion gave them a strange resilience. They faced each sunrise renewed, as if the act of prayer had rebuilt them from within. You breathe deeply, letting your body sink toward the straw beneath you. The scent of smoke and tallow fills the tent. Someone nearby hums a hymn, the melody soft and slow. The tune circles in your mind long after the voice fades. For a moment, you are neither soldier nor pilgrim, just another soul asking the night to be kind. The candle's flame gutters low, then steadies. You trace its outline with your eyes until everything blurs. Faith is not comfort tonight. It is structure, something to lean on. You think of the churches back home, their stone walls thick with warmth, the echo of choirs filling them. Here, under thin canvas, that echo is replaced by the hush of wind, but it is still enough. You stretch out, wrapping your cloak tighter. The last prayer of the night slips from your lips, not memorized but instinctive, a quiet plea that sleep come quickly and without dreams. The candle dies at last, leaving only the faint smell of smoke and wax. For a moment, everything holds its breath. The world feels suspended between light and dark, belief and fatigue. Then the rhythm of sleep takes you, slow and gentle, carrying your whispered prayer into the silence of the stars. You sleep, but your mind drifts far from the tent. The air feels softer here, the earth no longer cold but weightless beneath you. In your dreams, you walk through a misty plain where distant bells echo, and you are not sure if they ring from home or from heaven. Dreams for a crusader are never just dreams. They are messages, memories, or warnings carried by the night. A monk who recorded the lives of soldiers on the march wrote that dreams were taken seriously in the camps. Men shared them in the mornings like omens. A vision of fire could mean victory or divine anger. A river could mean cleansing or death. The same image might inspire courage in one man and despair in another. You think of that as the mist thickens around you, blurring the line between body and soul. Few modern people realize how powerful dreams were to the medieval mind. For Crusaders, sleep was a doorway to both the sacred and the dangerous. It was said that angels and demons wrestled for a man's soul while he slept, whispering futures he could not yet understand. Even exhaustion could become prophecy. A curious letter from a knight in the Holy Land describes dreaming of his wife standing by their hearth at home, her hands bright with flour. When he awoke, he believed God had shown him her soul safe in heaven. Others mocked him, but he swore the dream felt more real than waking. Such visions gave soldiers comfort when all other certainty had vanished. Experts studying medieval belief still debate how literally these men took their dreams. Some argue that visions were spiritual armor, a way to give meaning to endless hardship. Others think they were simply born of fatigue, hunger, and the constant flicker of candlelight on the mind. The boundary between faith and fever was often invisible. You shift in your sleep, your hands twitching as if you could grasp the images passing by. You see home again, the wooden beams above the hearth, the scent of baked bread, a familiar face laughing softly. It is a memory so vivid that you can almost feel the warmth of it, but when you reach out, the figure dissolves into frost. The dream shatters like thin ice. You wake with a start, your breath visible in the cold air. The tent around you feels both too small and infinite. Someone nearby murmurs in their sleep, and the fire outside has long since died. You listen to the night and realize how fragile the distance is between peace and terror. Sleep may bring rest, but it also opens doors you cannot close. You close your eyes again and try to return to the warmth of the dream, but instead, new images come. Faces you do not know, battles you have not fought, a sky filled with strange light. You wonder if the saints truly visit in sleep, or if the human mind simply needs to imagine comfort in a world so devoid of it. An overlooked chronicle from the Hospitaller Order tells of soldiers dreaming collectively on the eve of great battles. They claim to see the same signs, crosses burning in the sky, angels wielding swords, or rivers of blood turning to gold. Historians remain uncertain whether this was coincidence, mass suggestion, or something deeper. Whatever the cause, those dreams often pushed men forward with renewed conviction. The night stretches long, and though your body lies still, your mind travels across continents. You visit home again, your childhood fields now covered in frost, the faces of your family glowing faintly like candlelight behind glass. Then the image fades, replaced by endless plains, tents, and stars. You are back in the crusading camp, and everything feels both real and imagined. Dreams are generous liars. They promise warmth to the freezing, reunion to the lonely, forgiveness to the guilty. You feel all of that at once and realize how much your waking hours depend on these illusions. Without them, the cold would win. Outside, the first light of dawn touches the tent seams, painting faint gold lines along the canvas. You exhale, realizing that somehow you have slept through the worst of the night. The dreams are already dissolving, but they have left behind a strange calm. You are not sure whether to thank God or your own exhausted brain, but either way, the gift of sleep feels divine. You sit up slowly, rubbing your eyes. The camp is beginning to stir again. A rooster crows from somewhere near the stables, and the smell of smoke returns as someone rekindles a fire. You pull your cloak tighter, grateful for the dull ache in your limbs that proves you are alive. The dream still lingers faintly at the edge of your thoughts. You cannot recall its details, only the feeling of warmth and the sound of bells fading in the distance. Maybe that is all it was meant to give you a reminder that, even here in the harsh heart of the world, the mind can still find beauty in the dark. You wake with your throat dry and your skin burning. The air feels heavy, thick with the sour scent of illness. Around you, the usual rustle of morning has changed. Coughs echo longer than before, and the groans of men rising sound slower, heavier. You sit up, pulling your cloak close, and realize the cold has found a new way to attack. It is no longer just outside your body, it is inside it. A careful account from a chronicler of the First Crusade tells how fevers and chills moved through camps like invisible armies. Men would go to sleep healthy and wake, shaking uncontrollably, their teeth rattling, their fingers blue. The cold had patience. It waited for fatigue to weaken the flesh, then crept in through every breath. Few people today understand how exposure shaped medieval life. Without proper shelter or medicine, the line between exhaustion and death was terrifyingly thin. Some soldiers wrapped themselves in every scrap of cloth they could find, yet still trembled through the night. You can feel that same trembling now, crawling from your spine to your fingertips. A forgotten letter from a hospitaller medic describes a strange cure, heating stones in a fire and pressing them against the chest to drive out the chill. It works sometimes, he claimed, though perhaps only because the warmth felt like hope. Another method involved drinking hot wine mixed with garlic or crushed herbs. You recall seeing a knight nearly gag on such a mixture once, his eyes watering while his friends swore it would save him. Modern historians remain divided about how many soldiers truly died from exposure rather than combat. Some estimate the number was nearly equal. Others argue that chronic fatigue and malnutrition disguised the symptoms. You suspect the truth lies in the middle. Death was rarely tidy enough to categorize. You look around the tent. One of your companions is still lying flat, his face pale under the morning light. His breath fogs faintly, but his hands are still. You nudge him gently, and he stirs, eyes glassy. "Just tired," he mumbles, though his voice quivers like stretched cloth. You leave him a piece of bread you cannot afford to spare. Outside, the camp feels subdued. Fires burn lower, and the sound of metal is muted. Men cough into their sleeves. A few sit hunched over, staring into the dirt. The healers move quietly among them, carrying wooden bowls of water and strips of linen. The smell of vinegar lingers, sharp and clean. It mingles with the smoke of burning herbs that someone insists will drive away sickness. An intriguing note in a Persian observer's report mentions that Crusaders seemed obsessed with smoke as purification. They burned juniper, pine resin, even horse dung, believing the fumes cleansed the air. The logic was simple. If it smelled strong, it must be strong against evil. You wrinkle your nose at the memory of that stinging cloud, though you remember how it gave a strange comfort on freezing nights. The medics themselves are a study in contradiction. Some pray as they work, crossing themselves between each patient. Others mutter curses when bandages freeze to wounds. Their tools are simple: knives, needles, cups for bleeding, and whatever cloth they can find. You watch one man heat a small blade in the fire, the metal glowing orange. The light flickers against his weary face, and you can see both devotion and despair in his eyes. A veteran beside you speaks quietly, saying that the cold takes a man more gently than the sword. It lets him drift away in his sleep, his breath slowing until it simply stops. You do not know if he says it for comfort or warning. Either way, you find yourself pulling your cloak tighter, as if that could hold your life in place. By evening, the sickness has deepened. The healer's tent glows with candlelight, the silhouettes of bodies shifting within. Someone outside whispers a prayer to Saint Roche, protector against plague, though no one knows what illness stalks the camp tonight. The men speak of cursed winds or bad water. One claims the cold itself has a soul, that it moves from tent to tent like a jealous spirit. You laugh softly at the superstition, but not entirely. The air feels alive. When night falls, you lie down again on your straw bed. Your body aches and your lips taste of salt and ash. Around you, the camp grows quieter than usual. The usual chatter before sleep has faded to murmurs. Somewhere a horse stamps nervously, sensing the unease that humans try to ignore. You think about how fragile it all is. Faith, courage, even the layers of wool that keep you alive, they are only thin defenses against the vastness of cold and time. You close your eyes and breathe carefully, counting each exhale like a prayer. For now, the fever has not taken you. You are still here, wrapped in sound and breath, and the stubborn will to live. The wind rises again, and the tent shivers as if alive. You feel a spark of warmth from the small fire outside, faint but real. It touches your cheek like a blessing. You decide that must be enough for tonight. You pull your cloak to your chin, whisper a single line you barely remember, and drift toward a shallow, uneasy sleep. The morning light creeps slowly into the camp, pale and uncertain. You wake to the sound of soft voices outside, women's voices. They are not soldiers, but they move among the tents with the confidence of those who belong. They carry buckets of water, baskets of bread, bundles of linen. Without them, the camp would fall apart within a week. An early Crusade chronicle describes these women in brief, respectful tones: cooks, laundresses, nurses, and sometimes companions. The official records rarely name them, yet every soldier knew that they were the quiet backbone of the march. They washed wounds, patched clothing, and buried the dead when no priest was nearby. Their presence was both practical and forbidden, holy and scandalous in equal measure. Few modern readers realize how many women followed the armies eastward. Some were wives who refused to stay behind, others merchants or pilgrims seeking protection. A few were former servants who saw in the crusading host a chance for survival. They traveled the same roads, endured the same cold, and faced the same hunger. A fragment from a letter found near Antioch describes a woman who baked bread for soldiers in exchange for scraps of cloth. She is never named, only called the Baker of the Frost, because her hands were cracked and white from kneading dough in freezing air. You can almost see her now, sleeves rolled up, face red with heat from the oven's mouth, feeding an army one loaf at a time. Historians continue to debate how the church viewed their presence. Some argue that women were tolerated out of necessity, others that their presence was quietly blessed as an act of mercy. There are stories of priests turning a blind eye while these women tended to the sick or comforted the dying. Officially, they were unmentioned. In reality, they were everywhere. You watch as one of them approaches the tent, her cloak drawn tight, her breath forming mist. She carries a jug of warm broth and a stack of folded cloths. Her face is tired, her eyes soft but firm. Without speaking, she hands the jug to the man lying beside you, the one who had been sick the night before. He nods weakly, his lips barely forming words of thanks. She only smiles and moves on to the next tent. A curious entry in a Templar's diary recounts how, during one bitter winter, soldiers began to refer to the women as angels of straw, because they always seemed to appear at the worst moments with blankets or food. The phrase was both affectionate and ironic, since these angels were often covered in the same mud and soot as everyone else. You follow the woman with your eyes until she disappears behind another tent. Her presence lingers like warmth after a fire. Around the camp, the rhythm of daily life begins again, but it feels steadier, more human. The women's laughter mixes with the clatter of armor, a sound as vital as the beating of drums. A researcher who studied Crusader settlements once noted that evidence of women's work, broken pottery, spinning whorls, and charred breadcrumbs appears in every layer of excavation. Their labor left physical traces even when their names were forgotten. You think of that and realize that survival often hides in the small, unseen acts of care that history forgets to mention. By evening, the camp smells of stew and smoke. You sit near a fire while a group of women stirs a pot, their hands moving with practiced grace. The aroma drifts through the air, rich and earthy, and your stomach tightens with hunger. They chat softly in different tongues, words you cannot understand but whose tones carry the warmth of familiarity. One of them offers you a piece of bread, still hot. You accept it, feeling the roughness of her hand as your fingers brush. For a moment, the distance between soldier and civilian, sinner and saint, dissolves. You both exist simply as people trying to stay alive. A curious rumor circulates through the men, claiming that a few women carry small relics, locks of hair, splinters of supposed holy wood, to keep the cold and death away. Whether it is true or not, the belief brings comfort. In this landscape of frost and faith, anything that keeps fear quiet is sacred enough. As the fire burns lower, you watch the women finish their work and retreat to their own tents. The camp grows quieter, and the stars return overhead, sharp and countless. You lie back, the taste of bread still on your tongue, and think of how history will remember the knights and kings, but not the hands that warmed the broth or mended the wounds. You close your eyes with that thought, the last image of the day, not of banners or battles, but of tired women walking through the smoke, carrying the warmth of humanity in a world that had almost forgotten it. The next camp is larger, spread like a small city across the valley floor. Smoke rises in slow curls from 100 fires, and the sound of hammers and voices fills the evening air. As you walk between the rows of tents, you notice how the shelters change shape with rank. The closer you get to the command tents, the thicker the walls of fabric, the brighter the lamps, the softer the ground beneath your boots. A Latin chronicler from the Second Crusade wrote that the camp reflected the order of heaven, meaning every man slept according to his station. Knights in the center, squires and servants near the edges, foot soldiers and laborers beyond the fire's reach. It was a hierarchy of warmth as much as power. Even in sleep, the lines of privilege were drawn with ropes and pegs. Few people today imagine how wide the gap could be. A knight's tent might hold carpets, cushions, and even a wooden bed frame carried by pack animals. Inside, a squire kept a brazier glowing through the night, and furs draped over the entrance to block the wind. Meanwhile, only a few steps away, ordinary soldiers huddled together on bare straw, their breath freezing in the air. A curious detail from a scribe accompanying Richard's army describes noble tents scented with crushed herbs to mask the smell of sweat. He even noted how some knights warmed wine before sleeping, a small luxury that felt almost sinful among the starving ranks outside. That kind of comfort created quiet resentment, but also a strange hope. The common men watched their leaders' fires and dreamed of better nights. Modern researchers still argue over how strictly these separations were enforced. Some believe necessity blurred the boundaries during harsh winters, forcing all ranks to share fires and shelters. Others point to surviving camp layouts that suggest order held even under hardship. The truth probably shifted with the weather and the temperament of the commanders. You walk past the richer quarters, their tents glowing softly with lamplight. The shadows inside move like gentle ghosts, men talking in low tones, the clink of metal cups. A knight's laughter drifts through the night, deep and unbothered. Then you pass beyond their circle, into the darker sprawl where the air smells of ash and horse dung. The laughter fades, replaced by coughs and the crackle of damp wood. Here, men sleep close together for warmth. Their tents are patched with cloth from dead comrades, stitched with whatever thread they could find. You hear a snore, then a muttered curse. Someone dreams loudly of home. Another man mumbles a prayer through clenched teeth. This part of the camp feels alive in a different way, rougher, but more real. An account from a Venetian observer mentions that officers sometimes sent musicians to play near the noble tents in the evenings. The music floated faintly through the camp, a reminder of rank even in exhaustion. You imagine that sound now, soft strings carried on cold wind, fading before it reaches the poorer tents. You stop near a small fire shared by a handful of men. One offers you a seat, another a crust of bread. The fire's light reveals their faces, hollowed by fatigue but kind. You talk quietly about the march ahead, about how the leaders live in warmth while the rest freeze. Yet no one speaks with bitterness. The hierarchy is too old, too familiar to question. Survival leaves little room for envy. Still, as the night deepens, you cannot help but glance toward the distant glow of the night's fires. Their silhouettes move against the canvas walls like shadows in a dream. You wonder if they ever think of the men out here, if comfort dulls their fear. Perhaps it does. Perhaps it is the only way they can carry the burden of command. A curious story survives from one winter campaign. When a sudden frost struck, a high-ranking lord ordered his tent open to his men, inviting a dozen to sleep inside for warmth. By morning, most of them were dead, the fire having burned low in the night, the smoke trapped beneath heavy cloth. The tale became a warning about generosity and the dangers of closed air. You think of that as you watch the smoke from your own fire curl into the open sky. You pull your cloak tighter and lie down near the edge of the circle. The sound of laughter still drifts faintly from the noble tents, but it no longer stings. You are too tired to resent anything tonight. The fire flickers, your companions settle into quiet breathing, and the stars above seem close enough to touch. The ground beneath you is as cold as ever, but the knowledge that the same wind touches kings and soldiers alike feels oddly comforting. You close your eyes and let that equality lull you towards sleep, a small rebellion against the invisible walls of rank that surround the camp. By now, the camp no longer feels temporary. Wooden stakes rise around the perimeter, forming rough palisades. Ditches have been dug, watchtowers built from scavenged timber, and the fires burn in neat circles. You can smell the difference immediately. This is not a wandering army tonight. This is a fortress that breathes. A contemporary account by a Crusader engineer describes how armies fortified their camps whenever they paused near enemy ground. They built earthworks, drove sharpened stakes into frozen soil, and used overturned wagons to form barriers. In those long nights of waiting, even soldiers became builders. The act of hammering and digging gave purpose to fear. Few people today appreciate how skilled these armies became at constructing defenses from nothing. The tools were simple axes, shovels, rope, but the results could withstand siege for days. By dusk, the outer walls looked sturdy enough to deter raiders, though everyone knew they were little more than symbols of control against chaos. An interesting note found in a Byzantine observer's chronicle mentions that Crusaders often blessed their newly fortified camps, sprinkling water from helmets and reciting Latin prayers over sharpened stakes. To them, wood and faith worked hand in hand. A fence was both a physical defense and a spiritual line drawn against evil. Modern scholars still discuss whether these camps were designed for security or morale. Some argue they were meant to discourage surprise attacks, while others suggest they were psychological shields, making weary men believe they had regained power over an endless wilderness. Looking at the flickering walls tonight, you suspect both are true. You walk along the edge of the camp, where the palisade cuts a jagged silhouette against the night sky. Beyond it lies the vast plain, black and endless. The moon glints faintly on frost-covered grass. Somewhere far away, a wolf howls, its cry carried by the wind until it fades into silence. You grip your cloak tighter, grateful for the thin sense of safety the wooden walls provide. Inside, the camp hums with new order. Fires burn at measured intervals, and guards move between them, their spears gleaming. A group of men sits near a half-built watchtower, eating quietly. Their hands are raw from the cold and the work, but their faces hold a strange calm. For the first time in weeks, you feel something close to stability. A peculiar anecdote from a German knight tells how soldiers began naming their fortified camps after saints, believing that each wall had a patron protector. The one you're in tonight might have been called St. Michael's Rest or St. Jerome's Refuge. Such names made the freezing nights seem holier, less accidental. You find a spot near the palisade and sit, your back against the wood. The timber feels solid beneath your shoulders, its rough grain catching your cloak. Above you, the stars shimmer through gaps between logs. The camp smells of pine resin and smoke, mingled with the faint scent of sweat. A soldier beside you passes a flask, muttering a short prayer before drinking. He offers it to you next, and the liquid burns your throat like sunlight trapped in a bottle. You both sit in silence, listening to the sounds of hammering from the far side of the camp. The rhythm is steady and almost comforting, like a heartbeat in wood. Later, as the fires begin to dim, you climb the watchtower for a better view. The world unfolds below you, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Rows of tents, a maze of paths, and the quiet flicker of torches. Beyond the walls, darkness stretches without end. You realize how fragile this fortress really is, yet how powerful it feels to believe it can hold. A strange story circulates among the men tonight. They say that once, during a winter storm, a fortified camp vanished overnight, swallowed by snow so heavy that only the tops of the walls were visible by morning. Those who survived swore they heard the wind singing hymns through the wooden stakes. Whether the story is true or not, no one dares laugh at it. The line between weather and miracle has always been thin here. As you descend from the tower, you notice how quiet the camp has become. The wind presses against the walls, making them creak like the hull of a ship at sea. You lie down near the base of the palisade, the wood shielding you from the worst of the gusts. The sound of hammering fades, replaced by the deep stillness of a fortress at rest. You close your eyes and imagine the walls around you glowing faintly with the prayers that built them. Every plank, a whispered promise of safety. The world beyond is vast and cold, but within these fragile defenses, you let yourself drift. The wood groans softly above you, not as warning, but as a lullaby shaped by human hands. When morning breaks, the light feels thin and tired. You step outside the fortified camp and look toward the horizon where the air itself seems to shimmer. The army has moved again, leaving behind the wooden walls that gave you a few nights of peace. Ahead lies a new kind of cold, one that changes its face with every mile. Sometimes it comes from the high passes of Anatolia, sharp and dry, cutting through armor like glass. Other times it rises from the sands of Syria, where the sun burns by day and the chill bites even harder by night. A veteran once told you that there are two kinds of cold in this world, the kind that comes from lack and the kind that comes from too much. Too much height, too much sky, too much emptiness. You begin to understand what he meant as you march along the dusty road, the wind curling around your face with the smell of stone and salt. Records from Crusader expeditions describe how soldiers struggled to adjust to these extremes. Many who survived the frozen passes of Asia Minor later fell ill under the starry, icy nights of the desert. Their armor and woolen cloaks that once protected them from frost became traps for sweat and sand. The same gear that saved lives in one place could endanger them in another. Few modern readers grasp the contradiction of desert cold. During the day, you can feel the heat clawing at your lungs, but once the sun falls, that same air turns against you. The stars come out like sharpened points, and the wind feels ancient, as if it carries the breath of forgotten gods. You pull your cloak tighter, but the chill seems to rise from within the earth itself. A curious detail in a letter written by a soldier stationed near Damascus mentions that men sometimes slept half buried in sand to trap their body heat. He claimed the sand held warmth better than air, though others laughed at the idea. Still, in the silence of night, you imagine the comfort of being swallowed by the land, cocooned against the cold. Historians have long debated which environment was more punishing, the mountains or the desert. Some point to the icy ridges of Anatolia, where whole columns froze in blizzards. Others note that in the desert, water froze in leather skins by dawn, and horses collapsed from exhaustion. Each landscape carried its own cruelty, and the soldiers had to learn new ways to sleep in both. As the sun sets, you find yourself camped between rocky hills. The air cools quickly, the heat vanishing as if stolen. Men build fires in shallow pits, shielding them from the wind with stones. The flames flicker blue at first, then settle into orange, their light casting long, shivering shadows on the rock walls. You kneel beside one, your hands outstretched, your breath forming ghosts in the dark. A traveler from the east once told the Crusaders that the desert's cold is not like the cold of the north. It does not stab or bite. It seeps. It waits. It turns breath into frost before you realize you are freezing. You think of that as you lie down on your cloak, feeling the chill creep upward from the sand. You wrap your cloak tighter and adjust your tunic layers. The wind sighs over the dunes, carrying the sound of distant singing. Perhaps it is the men at another fire, or perhaps the wind itself is playing tricks. The stars above burn impossibly bright, so many that they seem to hum. An old superstition whispers that those who sleep under too many stars lose part of their soul to them. Some soldiers cover their faces with cloth before sleeping, as if to keep the sky from seeing too much. You smile faintly at the thought, then follow their example, drawing your hood low. The air tastes of dust and salt, sharp and clean. You think of the mountain passes behind you, where the cold was thick and grey, where even breathing hurt. Now the cold here feels cleaner, lonelier. You realize that survival is not about fighting the temperature, but learning to listen to it, to move with it like a second pulse. Modern climatologists who have studied records from the Crusades note that the weather patterns then were unpredictable, a mixture of extremes caused by shifting winds. It was an age when frost and drought could follow each other in a single week. You find some comfort in that chaos, as if the world itself was as restless as the people who marched across it. As night deepens, you burrow into the sand a little, feeling the last warmth of the fire fade. The ground still holds a hint of heat from the sun, a memory of light buried beneath the cold. You close your eyes and let your breathing match the slow rhythm of the wind. The desert hums quietly around you, ancient and indifferent. The same stars that guided caravans now watch over you. You are just another traveler passing through the balance between burning and freezing, life, and exhaustion. As you drift into uneasy sleep, you realize that the cold has become less of an enemy and more of a teacher, one that accepts no excuses, only endurance. The sun rises pale over the camp, and the air smells of dust and ash. You open your eyes to a new world of colors, muted gold, deep clay, and the faint shimmer of distant hills. This is not Europe anymore, and you feel it in every grain of sand beneath your fingers. The cold has changed again, softer now but still unrelenting. Yet within this foreign chill, something new stirs wisdom borrowed from those who have lived with the desert far longer than any crusader. A record kept by a scribe accompanying the army of King Baldwin tells of how the Franks began learning from the locals. At first, they scoffed at the long robes and open tents of the Arabs, believing them too light for protection. But as the nights grew colder, they watched the Bedouin wrap themselves in layers of cotton and wool, loose enough to trap air, tight enough to keep out wind. By imitation came survival. Few people today realize that the Crusaders' clothing began to change during these campaigns. The heavy cloaks and mail of the Northern Knights gave way to lighter robes and wide sashes borrowed from their eastern neighbors. It was practical adaptation, not conversion, though some back home might have called it heresy. You run your hand over your own tunic now, rough wool patched with a strip of fine linen traded from a Syrian merchant. The mix feels strange but right. An account from a pilgrim physician describes the first time he saw a crusader warming his tent with a charcoal brazier, a technique learned from locals who used small clay pots filled with embers. The soft glow gave gentle heat without smoke. That detail still feels miraculous when you see it in use tonight, the faint red light like a heartbeat inside the canvas. Specialists studying the exchange between East and West still debate how much influence passed in each direction. Some argue the Crusaders adopted local customs out of respect for efficiency. Others believe pride delayed their learning, and only desperation forced them to change. You suspect it was both. Pride always yields eventually to cold. You step outside and watch the camp bustle with quiet industry. A group of men unrolls rugs woven with geometric designs, their colors faded but still beautiful. They use them not for prayer, as the locals do, but for insulation, layering them beneath sleeping mats. The ground feels warmer, less hostile. It is a small discovery, yet one that spreads quickly among the soldiers. Nearby, a man tends to a brazier, gently fanning the coals with a flat piece of leather. He smiles when you approach and gestures for you to warm your hands. The heat rises steadily, different from the sharp bite of wood fires. It is the kind of warmth that lingers, not blazes. You realize that the locals have mastered the art of conserving energy, not wasting it. Every flicker of flame is precious. A peculiar story circulates in the camp tonight, one that has already grown into legend. It tells of a knight who mocked a local trader for wearing a long robe instead of armor. When a sandstorm struck that evening, the trader wrapped himself completely in cloth and survived, while the knight suffocated beneath the weight of his mail. Whether true or not, the story spreads quickly, becoming both warning and lesson. Modern historians who study cross-cultural contact often describe this period as one of quiet transformation. Beneath the noise of war, there was an undercurrent of exchange. Spices for steel, fabric for discipline, knowledge for stubbornness. Even enemies recognized each other's wisdom when survival demanded it. As night falls, you return to your tent. The brazier glows faintly, and you arrange your cloak and robes around it as you have seen others do. The warmth spreads evenly, touching the fabric, the straw beneath you, and the air around your face. It feels like breathing inside a whisper. Outside, the camp murmurs with life. Men speak softly, some reciting Latin prayers, others repeating Arabic words they barely understand. A strange harmony has formed between languages. The sounds of hammering have faded, replaced by the rhythm of voices and the hiss of cooling metal. You lie back and stare through the open flap of the tent. The stars above are bright and endless, mirrored by the tiny lights of the camp below. For the first time since you left home, you feel a sense of balance. You are still a crusader, still far from everything familiar, but you have borrowed comfort from those who know the land better. A scholar centuries later would write that the greatest lesson of the Crusades was not conquest but adaptation. You think he might be right. The cold does not care where you were born. It rewards only those who learn. The brazier's glow fades softly, and you pull your new robe tighter, its fabric smelling faintly of smoke and spice. The warmth is steady now, human and borrowed, proof that knowledge can cross even the sharpest divides. You close your eyes, and for a little while, the desert night feels kind. The next day dawns pale and windless, the kind of morning where sound carries far. You wake to the muffled shuffle of sandals beside boots, the murmur of prayers in different tongues. The Crusader camp has become a strange mosaic of people now. Soldiers, monks, merchants, pilgrims, and wanderers all share the same frozen soil. You can smell bread baking near the fires and the sharper scent of horse sweat mixed with incense. One chronicler from the later Crusades wrote that every army carried two kinds of travelers, warriors of the sword and warriors of the soul. You look around and realize how true that feels. The camp has become a pilgrimage as much as a campaign. Some men fight for land or faith, but others are here chasing forgiveness, redemption, or simply a story to take home. Few modern readers understand how diverse these camps were. For every knight or archer, there were cooks, grooms, blacksmiths, and barefoot pilgrims walking under the same banners. Their tents were smaller, their rations poorer, yet they endured the same cold. You see them now, wrapped in patched cloaks, sleeping in tight groups near the fire pits. An overlooked letter from a Cistercian observer describes one evening when pilgrims shared their last crumbs of bread with a wounded knight. The writer seemed amazed, noting that the humble gave to the powerful without hesitation. For a brief moment, the cold erased the walls of status. You remember that as you pass a pilgrim kneeling by a brazier, his face hidden by a rough hood, whispering prayers over the glowing coals. Researchers still discuss whether the Crusader camps were unified by faith or simply held together by need. Some suggest that piety bound them more tightly than discipline ever could. Others believe necessity was the true god of the road. You sense both forces here, devotion whispered into the night, and the quiet sharing of warmth that keeps everyone alive. A curious note found in a Genoese merchant's journal describes how pilgrims often slept beside the soldiers, their simple blankets spread near the armor racks. The soldiers pretended annoyance, but quietly left space for them. The merchant wrote that he once saw a knight wake to find a pilgrim's hand clasped around his own in sleep, as though the man had reached for safety in his dreams. That image lingers with you, gentle and human. You sit near the edge of camp, where the poorest rest. Their tents are little more than cloth tied to sticks, their fires weak and smoky. Yet when you greet them, they smile easily, as though warmth itself can be shared through kindness. One offers you a cup of thin broth, the steam rising like a ghost between you. You drink slowly, feeling it spread through your chest. A strange custom has taken root here. Before sleep, the pilgrims and soldiers exchange blessings. The words differ, some Latin, some Greek, some in rough local dialects, but the meaning is always the same. May you wake. In a world where not waking is always possible, that wish becomes the highest form of love. The fire beside you crackles as the last of the wood burns down. You see faces leaning into its glow, weathered, hungry, half lost. They talk quietly about home, about roads that seem impossibly far away. One man speaks of vineyards, another of a daughter he has not seen since she learned to walk. The stories drift into the cold air, vanishing but leaving warmth behind. A later historian would describe these mingled communities as temporary parishes of the cold, where faith became less about doctrine and more about endurance. Listening now, you understand what that means. No sermon could hold people together as well as shared suffering. When the night deepens, the camp falls into uneasy stillness. You lie among strangers, your head resting on your folded cloak. Around you, 100 breaths rise and fall. It sounds almost like waves on a distant shore. Somewhere a voice murmurs a prayer for safe passage, answered softly by another voice nearby. The cold presses close again, but it feels gentler now, softened by proximity. The stars above shine cold and clear, yet you feel less alone beneath them. The air smells faintly of wood smoke, sweat and bread, a trinity of human persistence. You close your eyes and let the rhythm of shared breathing lull you. Tonight, there is no difference between pilgrim and soldier, sinner and saint. There are only bodies huddled against the dark, finding salvation in the simple miracle of each other's warmth. Night returns quietly. The air grows heavy, as if listening, and the campfire light flickers in odd shapes against the tent walls. Someone whispers nearby about spirits that walk between the tents after midnight, drawn to the breath of sleeping men. You smile at first, but when the wind shifts, you feel the chill slide across your skin like fingers. An early Crusader chronicle records that fear of the supernatural was strongest at the edges of the camp, where sentries stood alone. Many believed that the devil prowled there, whispering temptations into the ears of tired guards. Some men claimed to have seen figures wandering in the dark, neither enemy nor friend, vanishing when called to halt. Perhaps it was imagination, perhaps exhaustion. Still, no one ever mocked those who saw them. Few modern readers understand how much superstition governed these nights. Faith was everywhere, but it was threaded with fear. Relics and prayers offered comfort, yet even the devout carried charms hidden under their shirts. Small bones, bits of metal, smooth stones engraved with unknown signs. You find one such talisman tonight, tied to the tent pole near your head, a coin marked with a faint cross and something like a star. You don't remember putting it there. A curious note in an English pilgrim's diary describes how men hung small objects above their sleeping places, fragments of saints' relics, pieces of their children's clothing, dried herbs sewn into tiny pouches. The writer confessed he never slept without touching the charm before closing his eyes. He called it a poor man's blessing. You reach for your own charm now and feel comfort in its rough edges. Specialists in medieval religion still debate whether these practices were considered superstition or simply personal prayer. Some argue that the Church condemned such objects as remnants of paganism. Others suggest they were tolerated because belief itself was a kind of warmth. It was easier to forgive fear than to forbid it. You listen as another story ripples through the campfire circle. A man swears that he heard voices singing in the sky the night before a snowstorm. Another says he saw blue lights move between the tents, flickering like lanterns. The veterans nod quietly, neither agreeing nor doubting. After enough nights like this, you stop needing explanations. The fire snaps, sending sparks upward. For a moment, they look like tiny souls escaping. You rub your hands together, the motion rhythmic, almost ritualistic. Someone tosses a handful of salt into the flames, muttering a prayer to ward off bad luck. The salt pops and hisses, and everyone exhales in relief. Small rituals make large fears manageable. A fragment from a chronicler's notes in the Holy Land mentions that the Crusaders sometimes blended local beliefs into their own. They adopted the habit of burning certain resins and saying quiet invocations to angels before sleeping. These mixed traditions puzzled later historians but made perfect sense to those who lived them. The cold night was vast and mysterious. Any comfort was sacred. You lie back, staring at the tent ceiling, and the shadows seem to shift in slow patterns. You know it is only the firelight, yet the movement feels alive. You remember a tale told earlier in the march, that souls of those who froze in battle wander the camps, drawn to the warmth of the living. No one laughs when such tales are told. Too many have seen shapes that disappear when approached. Outside, a gust of wind sighs through the ropes. Somewhere, a tent flap lifts, then settles again. You hold your breath for a moment, listening. There is only the faint hiss of the fire, the rhythm of sleeping men, and the deep, slow heartbeat of the camp. You release the air slowly, letting the fear slide out with it. Modern psychology would call these night visions symptoms of exhaustion and stress, but that explanation belongs to another age. Here, in this half-lit world, belief is the language of survival. You whisper a few words yourself, not to a saint this time, but to the night, asking it to be merciful. The fire outside dies to embers. The last sound you hear before sleep takes you is the flutter of the tent cloth, as if something unseen brushed past. Maybe it was only the wind, maybe not. In this place, faith and fear share the same blanket, and you learn to rest beneath both. The next morning arrives grey and heavy, the sky low enough to touch. The air smells faintly of smoke and bitter herbs. You wake slowly, your body stiff, your throat dry. Around you, the camp stirs to life again, but the usual sounds feel subdued. Men cough more than they talk. Somewhere, a healer shouts for hot water, his voice cracking with fatigue. A monk who served as a field medic during the Second Crusade once wrote that sickness was a quieter enemy, yet one that never sleeps. The cold brought fevers, the damp brought infections, and superstition filled the spaces medicine could not reach. You think of that as you watch a line of men shuffle toward the healer's tent, each clutching his stomach or arm, wrapped in layers that no longer keep out the chill. Few people today realize how fragile medieval medicine truly was. Knowledge came from ancient texts, trial and error, and half-remembered remedies whispered between soldiers. Garlic boiled in wine for a cough, vinegar on wounds, crushed herbs for warmth. Sometimes these helped, sometimes they only gave comfort. Still, faith in the cure was often stronger than the cure itself. An intriguing detail from an Italian apothecary's notes lists the ingredients he carried east with the Crusaders: camphor, mint, myrrh, dried rose petals, and powdered bone. He believed that every illness had a smell, and that fragrance could chase sickness away. You catch a faint hint of those same smells now drifting from the healer's tent. Modern scholars continue to puzzle over how medicine and faith intertwined in these camps. Some describe it as chaos, others see it as a reflection of the age's deep spirituality. The healers prayed as they worked, not because prayer replaced skill, but because it steadied trembling hands. You can hear their voices now, low and rhythmic, blending with the rattle of pots and the hiss of boiling water. You sit near the entrance, watching. A man beside you pulls a small pouch from his belt, unties it, and reveals a paste made of honey and ash. He smears it over a cut on his arm, wincing at the sting. He explains that a priest told him the mixture draws out corruption. The logic makes a strange sort of sense. Honey soothes, ash purifies, and belief does the rest. A curious superstition spreads among the men tonight, that if you rub salt on your wrists before sleeping, fever spirits cannot enter your blood. Some follow it faithfully, their skin raw by morning. Others sew tiny pieces of iron into their sleeves, claiming that demons fear the touch of metal. The line between medicine and magic blurs until they become the same thing. An old soldier sitting near the fire tells a story of a healer who carried a charm shaped like a heart carved from olive wood. He said it pulsed when sickness approached. You doubt the truth of it, yet when the man swears he saw it glow once under the moon, no one laughs. The air around the fire feels suddenly colder. You recall something a modern historian once wrote about this era, that fear itself was an illness as contagious as plague. In the Crusader camps, faith became the antidote. Whether through prayer, herbs, or ritual, every act of care was also an act of hope. You find comfort in that idea, even as the coughing continues through the night. When your own turn comes, the healer examines your hands and mutters that your pulse feels thin, like winter water. He ties a strip of warm cloth around your wrist and tells you to sleep close to the fire. The cloth smells faintly of rosemary and smoke. You thank him, though you are not sure if it helps. Later, lying beside the flames, you feel the first warmth of the evening spread through your body. Someone nearby grinds herbs in a bowl, the rhythmic sound almost musical. The scent of mint and vinegar drifts through the tent, sharp but comforting. For a moment, it reminds you of your mother's kitchen back home. The memory eases the ache behind your eyes. Outside, the wind carries faint chanting from the healer's tent. The sound rises and falls with the firelight, a fragile chorus of faith against the endless cold. You close your eyes and listen. Whether it is prayer, medicine, or magic hardly matters. The act of care itself feels holy enough. You pull the rosemary cloth closer to your face and breathe in its scent until it fills your lungs. Sleep comes slowly but kindly, the fever receding with each exhale. Around you, the camp settles once more into uneasy stillness, and the night watches over the wounded like a silent guardian. The wind changes again that night. It smells of rain and cold iron, and the air feels heavy enough to crush sound. You know before the first drop falls that the storm will be bad. The sky has that bruised color that soldiers learn to dread. The fires hiss and die in seconds as rain begins to pour, sudden and hard. You crouch inside your tent, watching water trace thin rivers across the ground. A chronicler of the Third Crusade once described a night like this, when the storm came so fast that tents collapsed under the weight of water. Men woke choking on mud and freezing air. Some tried to light torches, but the rain smothered every spark. He called it the night when even the saints shivered. You finally understand what he meant. Few people today have felt the helplessness of a wet cold. It is not the sharp sting of frost, but a slow invasion. The water seeps into everything, your cloak, your boots, your bones. Even firewood kept close turns useless. The world becomes an ocean of shivering bodies and sodden cloth. A small parchment note found among Crusader relics mentions an old trick for such nights: digging shallow pits in the ground and lining them with straw and furs, then covering oneself completely with a cloak. The earth, the writer said, remembers the warmth of the day. You decide to try it, scraping at the mud with your knife until a hollow takes shape. It feels absurd, but desperation breeds invention. Modern researchers often argue about how soldiers endured such weather. Some believe they simply accepted suffering as divine trial, others that they relied on the stubbornness born of habit. Perhaps they are both right. You stop searching for meaning in the discomfort. You simply exist within it as they did. The rain grows colder. Water runs down the tent walls in silver streaks. You press your cloak tighter, your fingers numb. A neighbor mutters nearby, his voice nearly lost in the storm. He says that when fire fails, song keeps death away. Then he begins to hum, low and rough. Soon others join, voices scattered but brave. The tune has no words, only rhythm soft, circular, defiant. A curious note in a troubadour's letter from this era describes soldiers singing through nights of rain. He claimed the melody carried warmth through the camp like invisible fire. You can believe that now. The sound surrounds you, human and trembling, and for a moment the rain feels less cruel. The tent shifts as the wind picks up again. A pole creaks, a rope snaps. You press your shoulder against the canvas, holding it upright. The weight of water presses down, and you think briefly that you might be buried alive by your own shelter. Then the gust passes, and you breathe again. Lightning flashes somewhere far away, turning the camp into a world of white for a heartbeat. In that brief light, you see the outlines of men and animals hunched together, wrapped in every layer they own. The thunder follows like the roll of drums from an unseen army. The sound fades into the steady rhythm of rain. An odd superstition spreads among the younger soldiers, that lightning strikes only the unblessed. Some begin to make the sign of the cross each time the sky flashes. Others stay perfectly still. Convinced movement draws divine attention. You can feel the tension ripple through the camp, fear dressed in faith. Inside your tent, the floor puddles beneath you. You lift your belongings onto your lap to keep them dry. The air smells of wet wool and smoke. You think about the fragility of everything around you, the cloth, the ropes, even your own resolve. And yet, despite the misery, there is a strange beauty in it too. The storm strips away the pretense of glory. It leaves only survival, raw and equal. Hours pass. The rain softens to a whisper. You crawl from your hollow and find the camp transformed. The fires are gone. The ground shines like glass, and every tent drips with cold jewels of water. A grey dawn waits beyond the clouds. You can hear men moving slowly, wringing out their cloaks, laughing weakly at their own soaked misery. A scholar centuries later would write that the Crusaders learned to make peace with the elements, not because they conquered them, but because they endured them. You believe that? The night has taught you humility, the kind that settles deep in the bones. You wring out your cloak and lay it flat, letting the faint morning light dry its edges. The world smells clean again, rinsed of smoke and pride. You lie back on the damp earth, close your eyes, and let the last drops of rain fall softly onto your face. The storm has passed, leaving behind silence and the quiet relief of still being alive. The sun rises pale and distant, its light thin as paper. You open your eyes to frost clinging to every surface, each blade of grass turned into a tiny dagger of ice. Around you, the camp wakes slowly, men moving stiffly, their breath rising like smoke from smouldering coals. There is no conversation, only the muted rhythm of survival. You stretch, and your joints pop like frozen branches. A chronicler from the army of Frederick Barbarossa once wrote that mornings were the true test of a crusader. The nights were harsh, but the dawn was colder. It was then that courage meant the simplest acts. Standing up, walking to the fire, putting one foot before the other. Faith and bravery might fill songs, but discipline kept men breathing. Few modern readers grasp how structured these mornings had to be. Even in the worst cold, the army followed routine. Fires were rekindled before sunrise, weapons checked, tents rolled, animals fed. No matter how numb the hands or how heavy the frost, every movement had order. Habit was the armor against despair. An entry from a soldier's letter describes this ritual in vivid detail. "We rise as the light comes," he wrote, "and move as though commanded by the sun itself." He explained that routine dulled the mind's complaints. To wake, to eat, to march, these became prayers of their own. You feel the truth of that as you join the men gathered around a rekindled fire. Modern historians still debate whether the discipline of Crusader camps came from faith, fear, or sheer necessity. Some argue it was religious obedience that made men follow such routines. Others believe it was the only way to prevent collapse. You think it was both. Repetition became a quiet form of devotion. The man beside you scrapes frost from his shield with a knife, his fingers shaking. Another blows into his hands, then rubs them against the horse's flank for warmth. No one speaks until the first flames finally catch. Then, as if granted permission, conversation begins: soft laughter, small jokes, curses at the cold. Life stirs again. A peculiar detail survives in an old field manual, copied by monks. Soldiers were advised to keep moving even after waking. "Let no man linger," it says, "for the frost will steal him if he stands still." The phrase makes you smile. It sounds like superstition, yet the wisdom behind it is sound. The cold respects motion, not pride. You rise and begin packing your gear. The ground crunches beneath your boots. Your hands ache as you fold the stiff fabric of your cloak, still damp from the storm. You work without thinking, each task a small meditation. The rhythm calms your mind, giving the illusion of control. Around you, others do the same, their movements synchronized by routine rather than command. A faint horn sounds in the distance, calling the watch to change. The sound rolls through the camp like a sigh. You look up to see the faint shimmer of sunlight creeping over the frost. Everything glows silver for a moment, the tents, the armor, even the smoke rising from the fires. It is beautiful, in a quiet, brutal way. A Forgotten Knight's memoir tells of how frost turned to beauty at dawn, transforming the battlefield into a field of jewels. He wrote that the sight gave him courage, reminding him that even hardship could reflect light. You understand that sentiment now. The cold remains, but it feels less like punishment, more like a test that the living must pass each day anew. The captain shouts for the line to form, his voice rough but steady. Men groan, stretch, and shoulder their weapons. You join them, your body heavy but moving anyway. The first steps are always hardest. The frost cracks beneath your boots, sending small shards flying. The sun climbs higher, and the glittering landscape begins to melt into mud once more. As you march, you notice something quietly miraculous. Each breath you take becomes a small cloud in the air, and when you look back, hundreds of those clouds trail behind the army like steam from a living machine. It is proof of life, visible against the cold. You smile to yourself, because in this world, even breathing feels like defiance. Later that night, when you finally rest again, you think of this morning's frost. The image of sunlight catching on armor and straw stays with you. It reminds you that order and endurance can be their own form of beauty. Sleep comes slowly, but it comes without fear. The body, disciplined by routine, finds rest as naturally as it once found exhaustion. You drift into dreams where frost glows instead of bites, where the dawn feels like a blessing instead of a warning. The cold is still there, patient and eternal, but tonight it feels almost friendly, as if it too admires your persistence. The next evening brings a strange quiet to the camp. The air feels thick with thought rather than noise, as if the whole army is holding its breath. You sit by the fire, watching the smoke rise in delicate spirals, and for the first time in weeks you feel the urge to write, or at least to remember. The nights have begun to blend together, but memory, fragile as it is, must be kept alive. A Crusader clerk once confessed that he wrote letters home during the coldest hours of the night. His ink froze, his fingers stiffened, yet he said the act of writing warmed him more than fire. "It reminds me," he wrote, "that I am still a man, and not only a weapon." You understand him now. The mind needs its own kind of shelter. Few people today realize how much writing and storytelling meant to those who traveled so far from home. Even men who could not read dictated their words to clerks or friends. Letters, prayers, scraps of parchment, they were pieces of life carried across continents. You have seen soldiers whisper their thoughts into the fire, as if hoping the smoke itself would deliver them to the people they loved. A curious fragment from a surviving Crusader letter mentions a soldier describing the cold without bitterness. He wrote that frost made men honest. "In comfort we pretend," he said, "but in cold we remember." His letter ends abruptly, as though the ink ran out or his courage did. You think of that unfinished line and wonder what truths were left unsent. Modern historians often debate how much of the Crusaders' experience survives in their words. Some believe the letters were polished for church and family, filled with holy rhetoric. Others argue that the raw pain of these accounts is too sincere to be performance. Perhaps both are true. Faith and fear can live side by side on the same page. You watch the firelight flicker on the faces around you. Some men carve small crosses into bits of wood, others patch their boots or sharpen blades. The camp smells of tallow smoke and wet wool. A few men talk quietly about home, their voices slow and rhythmic, as if reciting familiar prayers. A strange tradition has begun here. Before sleeping, one man tells a story aloud to whoever will listen. The tales vary, some from the Bible, others of old kings or foolish spirits. The storyteller's voice softens the air, and the listeners, weary and silent, lean closer to the flame. It feels almost like a sermon, though no priest leads it. Story becomes warmth. An account from a Muslim chronicler mentions that the Franks often sang or recited tales late into the night, their words echoing across the valley like wind through reeds. He found it curious that their faith sounded so human, so fragile. He called them people who speak to fire as to a friend. You smile at the accuracy of that image. You pick up a scrap of cloth and trace lines on it with a bit of charcoal, trying to recall the pattern of your village's church window. The act feels clumsy but grounding. You whisper a name you have not spoken aloud in months, and the sound of it catches in your throat. Memory hurts, but it also steadies you. Nearby, someone hums the same melody you heard weeks ago, the one that rose from the tents during a rainstorm. The sound weaves through the camp like smoke. You close your eyes and let it carry you home for a moment. You picture the soft light of candles on wooden walls, the warmth of your own bed, the small, ordinary miracles you never noticed before. A later historian would write that these letters and songs were what humanized the Crusades. They were not just records of conquest, but reminders that men still dreamed while freezing, still loved while marching, still hoped while suffering. Listening now, you feel that truth moved quietly through the night like a pulse. The fire burns lower, and you add another stick. The flame catches, the smoke curls upward, and you imagine it carrying a message skyward. Maybe someone far away will breathe that same air, touched by the warmth you leave behind. You lie back, the stars reflected faintly in your half-frozen cup of water. The fire hums softly, and the last of the words you whispered seem to linger above you. Before sleep takes you, you promise yourself that if you survive another night, you will remember. Not the battles or the orders, but the quiet moments like this, when even the cold feels sacred in its stillness. The night before battle is never silent. The camp feels alive in a strange way, breathing through the restless bodies of thousands who know what tomorrow means. Fires burn lower than usual, voices stay hushed, and even the wind seems to move cautiously between the tents. You lie awake, staring at the faint glow through the canvas, knowing that sleep tonight carries a different weight. A chronicler from the army of Louis VII once wrote that the last night before combat was a rehearsal for death. He described the air as thick with whispered confessions and trembling prayers. Men tried to rest, but their hearts beat too loudly. Some sharpened blades again and again, not for need, but to keep their hands busy. You can hear that same rhythm now, the soft rasp of steel against stone in the darkness. Few modern readers realize that fear was as constant as faith in these camps. The stories speak of courage and divine purpose, yet most soldiers faced the night with quiet dread. They prayed, drank, or simply stared into the fire, hoping dawn would delay its coming. You feel that same unease pressing at your chest, an ache that has nothing to do with cold. A curious detail from an old monk's account tells of how soldiers, unable to sleep, passed their time mending cloaks, cleaning weapons, or sharing food they had saved for days. The act of preparation became sacred, a final ritual of order before chaos. You look around the camp and see the same. Men rewrapping their feet, adjusting buckles, muttering blessings under their breath. The motions keep fear at bay. Modern scholars still debate what went through the minds of those who faced battle after such nights. Some suggest faith truly erased fear, while others think exhaustion simply numbed it. Perhaps the difference no longer matters. When morning comes, every heart will beat the same, every hand will shake in the same cold air. You leave your tent and walk toward the outer fires. The sky above is clear, a vast black ocean pierced with stars. The earth crunches beneath your boots, frozen solid. Around you, groups of soldiers sit in circles, their faces lit by the faintest glow. Some speak softly of home, some laugh too loudly, others simply stare into nothing. A few pray in silence, their hands clasped so tightly that the knuckles turn white. A veteran once told you that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to walk with it. You repeat his words to yourself, letting them settle in your chest. The fire before you crackles, and for a moment you watch the sparks rise like tiny souls escaping into the night. A superstition spreads through the ranks this evening. It says that if you share your blanket with another man tonight, you will both survive the morning. You hesitate only a moment before returning to your tent and spreading your cloak over your sleeping companion. His breathing is slow, steady, innocent in its rhythm. You lie beside him and feel the warmth between your shoulders. It is enough. Outside, the priests move quietly through the camp, sprinkling water on weapons, murmuring blessings in Latin. The sound is soft, almost tender. For all the talk of glory, there is nothing triumphant in this moment, only the raw awareness of being alive and of how easily that might change. You close your eyes and try to sleep, but your thoughts drift to the days before the fires, the songs, the frozen mornings, the prayers whispered over bowls of broth. It strikes you that survival has always been a kind of battle too, fought each night against the cold. Tomorrow's fight will simply be louder. A gentle wind slips through the tent flap, brushing your cheek like a familiar hand. You let out a long breath. Around you, the camp grows quieter. The sound of sharpening stops. The murmurs fade. Only the faint crackle of the fire remains, joined by the distant rhythm of hooves as a patrol passes. You think of the stories told back home, the ones that will speak of victory and faith. But you know they will not mention this, the smell of damp wool, the taste of fear, the fragile warmth shared between weary men who just want one more sunrise. That truth belongs to the night alone. You pull your cloak up to your chin and close your eyes. The stars above seem to blur, each one a flickering candle in the vast cathedral of the sky. You whisper one last prayer, not for glory, but for peace. Then, at last, sleep finds you. The wind softens as dawn approaches. The air grows still, and even the restless horses quiet. You dream that the cold has vanished, replaced by gentle light. It spills across the camp, melting frost, touching every tent with gold. You feel the warmth spread through your limbs, not the harsh fire of battle, but the slow, forgiving heat of rest. For a moment, everything feels whole again. You see the straw beds, the fires, the faces of the men beside you, all bathed in calm. The war fades from your mind, replaced by silence. The world holds its breath. If anyone were watching, they might think you are smiling. The dream carries you further from the noise of life, deeper into peace. Somewhere beyond this frost, beyond fear and faith alike, the night itself exhales and lets you go. The story slows now. The cold retreats to the edge of your mind, leaving behind only the soft ache of memory. You are no longer in the camp, no longer a soldier pressed against the earth. You are drifting, as quiet as the smoke that once curled from the fires. The breath that fogged the air now fades into stillness. Imagine the field after dawn. The tents sag with dew, the sky pale and empty. A few embers glow in the ashes where laughter once lived. The wind moves gently, carrying the smell of wet straw and pine. The world feels washed clean, as if night has forgiven it. You walk through the hush of it all, your steps slow, your hands warm at last. Each sound softens. The distant clink of armor fades into the heartbeat of the earth. The air tastes calm, almost sweet. You feel the sunlight settle on your shoulders like a blanket, gentle and patient. Every breath becomes slower, deeper, safe. In your mind, you hear the echo of all the small things that kept you alive. The crackle of fire, the rustle of cloaks, the murmur of prayers shared between strangers. These were never just details of history. They were proof of how people loved life even while standing on its edge. Now let that thought rest. Let the frost melt away. Let the weight of the world fall from your shoulders. The night is ending, and peace is all that remains. Sleep deeply now. Let the echoes fade into quiet. You are safe, you are warm, and somewhere in the distance, the last fire still burns softly for you.